The static hiss of cosmic background radiation filled Lieutenant Mark Torres's ears as he monitored the long-range communications array aboard Luna Station. The graveyard shift was always quiet, giving him time to contemplate the vastness of space and humanity's tenuous presence within it. His eyes flicked over the readouts, checking signal strength from the scattered mining colonies and research outposts that dotted the nearby star systems. "Another boring night," he muttered, taking a sip of lukewarm coffee. Then, piercing through the static like a knife, came a sound that made his blood run cold, the distinctive three-pulse pattern of a human distress beacon, followed by a garbled voice transmission. Under attack. Unknown hostiles. Kepler 442b colony. Casualties mounting." Mark's fingers flew across the console, boosting the signal strength and recording the transmission. Kepler 442b, one of the most inhospitable planets ever colonized by humans. A death world in every sense. Crushing gravity at 1.3 times Earth standard, an atmosphere laced with hydrogen sulfide and chlorine compounds, temperature swings of over 70 degrees Celsius between day and night. Yet somehow, a small mining colony of 47 humans and 20 alien contract workers had managed to establish a foothold there, extracting rare minerals from the planet's crust that were valuable enough to justify the extreme conditions. "Luna Station to Kepler 442b. Come in," Mark called, adjusting frequencies to punch through the interference. "Repeat your situation. Over." More static. Then the voice returned, clearer but strained with panic. "This is Mining Supervisor Dave Johnson on Kepler 442b. We are under attack by unknown hostiles. They're like nothing we've ever seen. They phase in and out of solid form. Conventional weapons barely slow them down. We've lost the outer habitats. 16 confirmed dead. We're holed up in the central bunker, but life support is failing. We have maybe 48 hours before system collapse. Please, we need immediate evacuation." Mark felt his throat tighten. "Copy that. Kepler 442b. Stand by while I alert command." He hit the emergency alert, and within minutes, Commander Janet Rodriguez strode into the communications center, her face grim with resolve, despite being pulled from sleep. "Report, Lieutenant," she ordered, leaning over his console to examine the signal data. "Distress call from Kepler 442b. Ma'am. Colony under attack by unknown hostiles with unusual capabilities. They've requested immediate evacuation." Rodriguez's eyes narrowed. "Kepler 442b is 4 days away at maximum burn, even for our fastest ships." "Yes, ma'am," Mark replied, his voice heavy with the implication, "They've indicated life support will fail in approximately 48 hours. A pregnant silence filled the room. They both knew what that meant. Earth's colonial policy had always been pragmatic. Resources were limited, and not every emergency could be answered, especially for outposts as remote and dangerous as Kepler 442b, which had been established with a clear understanding that help might never arrive in time. Rodriguez straightened her back, a decision visibly forming behind her eyes. "We don't leave our people to die, Lieutenant. Not if there's any chance at all." She tapped her comm unit. "This is Commander Rodriguez. I need a direct line to Captain Robert Kane on the UES Defender. Priority Alpha." Mark felt a surge of pride. The Defender was Earth's newest heavy cruiser, currently on patrol in the Tau Ceti system. It was the only vessel with even a prayer of reaching Kepler 442b in time. "Patching you through now. Commander," he said, his fingers dancing across the controls. As Mark worked, the distress transmission continued to play, capturing the desperate voice of Dave Johnson as he described the situation on the ground. "They come through the walls like they're not even there, then solidify just long enough to attack. We've moved everyone to the central bunker. It's the only place with reinforced walls thick enough to slow them down. Jonesy and Martinez rigged the mining charges around the perimeter. We've got a few phase pulse rifles that seem to hurt them when they're solid, but ammunition is limited. If anyone receives this, please hurry. On Kepler, 442B. Dave Johnson wiped sweat from his brow as he finished the transmission. The central bunker, originally designed as a storm shelter against the planet's ferocious weather, had become their last refuge. 31 humans and 11 alien workers, all that remained of the colony, huddled inside the cramped space. The air scrubbers labored noisily, struggling to process the toxic compounds that had leaked in during their hasty retreat. "Did they hear us?" asked Maria Lopez, the colony's chief engineer. Her left arm was wrapped in a crude bandage, her face pale from blood loss. Dave shrugged. Trying to project confidence he didn't feel. Signal strength was good. If anyone's listening out there, they heard us. And if they did, growled Zentar, one of the Altarian mining specialists. His crystalline exoskeleton was cracked in several places, leaking the bioluminescent fluid that served as both blood and nervous system for his species. Your Earth government wrote this colony off as expendable the day they approved it. They won't risk a ship for us. Dave had no answer. The Altarian wasn't wrong. Kepler 442b had always been classified as a high-risk, minimal support outpost. The rare minerals they extracted were valuable, but not irreplaceable. The colony's budget allowed for basic equipment and supplies, nothing more. No defensive systems, no permanent military presence, not even a proper medical facility. Just 47 humans and 20 aliens sent to one of the most hostile environments ever colonized, with the unspoken understanding that they were on their own. We'll hold out as long as we can, Dave said finally. The bunker walls are 3 meters of reinforced plasteel. Even these things need time to phase through that. Unless they learn to stay solid longer, muttered Jonesy, the explosives expert. They're adapting. First encounter. They could only hold solid form for about 10 seconds. Last attack. I timed almost 30. Dave nodded grimly. That was the most terrifying aspect of their attackers. They were learning, evolving their tactics with each assault. The creatures resembled nothing so much as living shadows, vaguely humanoid in shape but with elongated limbs and no discernible facial features. They phased in and out of solid matter like ghosts, becoming tangible only to attack before dissolving back into insubstantiality. All right, listen up, Dave announced, raising his voice to address the survivors. We need to organize our defenses. Maria, I need you to rig the emergency vents to flood the outer corridors with raw atmosphere. If those things break through again, the sulfur compounds might slow them down. Maria nodded weakly. I can do that. The environmental controls are still responding. Jonesy, Martinez, set charges at these key points. Dave indicated several locations on the bunker's schematic. If we time the detonations for when they're solid, we might take out a few. What about the phase pulse rifles? Asked Sergeant Wilson, one of the colony's 2 security officers. We've got 3 working units and about 50 charges left. Conserve ammunition, Dave ordered. Single shots. Only when you've got a clear target in solid phase. No wasting charges. As the colonists moved to their assigned tasks, Dave checked the bunker's life support readouts again. The news wasn't good. Between the damaged systems and the number of people packed into a space designed for half their number, they were burning through oxygen and scrubber chemicals at an alarming rate. 48 hours had been an optimistic estimate. The reality might be closer to 36. He thought about the families back on Earth who would receive the standard notification, lost due to hostile action and environmental factors. A sterile epitaph for lives spent extracting wealth from a planet that had never wanted human presence. Dave had signed on as mining supervisor for the hazard pay, hoping to save enough for a small farm back on Earth. Now, He wondered if anyone would even remember their names a year from now. A sudden alarm jerked him from his thoughts. "Movement detected in Section 4, called Wilson, monitoring the few security sensors that still functioned. "They're coming through the north wall," Martinez reported, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. "I can see the phase distortion already." Dave grabbed one of the phase pulse rifles. "Everyone to positions. Remember, wait until they're solid, then make your shots count." Aboard the UES Defender, Captain Robert Kane stood on the bridge, his weathered face illuminated by the tactical display showing their plotted course to Kepler 442b. The ship's engines were pushed beyond their rated capacity, burning fuel at a rate that would leave them with barely enough for braking maneuvers when they arrived. "Status report," he demanded, his voice carrying the weight of 20 years in Earth's defense forces. Commander Lisa Park, his executive officer, stepped forward. "We're maintaining maximum acceleration. Captain, estimated arrival at Kepler 442b in 96 hours. Engineering reports the main drive is operating at 118% of design capacity." "Not good enough," Kane growled. "We need to be there in 48 hours or less." Park's expression remained professional, but her eyes betrayed her concern. "Sir, that would require acceleration well beyond safe parameters. We'd risk catastrophic drive failure." "I'm aware of the risks, Commander." Kane's gaze never left the tactical display. "But there are 47 of our people on that rock, plus their alien workers. I'm not arriving just to recover bodies." "Understood, sir." Park hesitated. "There's something else. Long-range sensors are detecting unusual energy signatures in orbit around Kepler 442b. Definitely not natural phenomena, and not matching any known colonial equipment." Kane frowned. "Hostile vessels?" "Unknown, sir. The energy pattern is strange, almost as if it's phasing in and out of our detection range." The captain's expression darkened. "Inform Major Wilson to prepare his Marines for immediate deployment upon arrival, and get me Dr. Samantha Rivera in xenobiology, if we're dealing with an unknown species. I want to know everything we can before we get there." As Park moved to comply, Kane studied the tactical display again. The Defender was Earth's newest heavy cruiser, armed with railgun batteries capable of accelerating projectiles to significant fractions of light speed, point defense laser arrays, and a complement of 50 Marines equipped for hostile environment operations. A formidable vessel. But they were heading into an unknown situation against an enemy with capabilities they didn't understand. "Message from Luna Station, Captain," reported the communications officer. "Commander Rodriguez sends her regards and confirms that no other vessels can reach Kepler 442b in under 6 days. We're the only hope those colonists have." Kane nodded grimly. "Then we don't let them down. Push the engines to 125%. I want continuous updates on drive stability." Back on Kepler 442b. The first wave of attacks had been repelled, but at a cost. 2 more colonists were dead, and Martinez had been badly wounded when one of the shadow creatures materialized partially inside the wall she was using for cover, its arm solidifying through her torso before she could move. Dave helped Maria adjust the makeshift medical equipment they'd cobbled together. "How's she doing?" "Not good," Maria replied softly. "Internal bleeding. She needs surgery we can't perform here." Across the bunker, Jonesy was rigging the last of their mining explosives around the primary entrance. "This is it, boss," he called to Dave. "Last of the charges, if they break through again." Dave nodded his understanding. They were down to the phase pulse rifles and whatever makeshift weapons they could fashion from mining equipment. The alien workers had contributed as well. The Altarians had discovered that their bioluminescent fluid caused pain to the shadow creatures when they made contact in solid form. and they'd volunteered to extract some for use as a weapon of last resort. "Status report on atmosphere flooding?" Dave asked, turning to Maria. "Ready to go," she confirmed. "I've rigged the emergency vents to pump raw Kepler atmosphere into all corridors leading to the bunker. The hydrogen sulfide concentration should be around 5,000 ppm. Lethal to us, and hopefully damaging to them." Dave checked his timepiece. 28 hours of life support remaining, and no word from Earth. He hadn't really expected any. Even if they'd received the distress call and dispatched a ship immediately, the fastest vessel in Earth's fleet would take at least 4 days to reach them. "They're coming back," Wilson called from his post at the sensors. Multiple phase signatures approaching from all sides. "They're learning," Zentar observed, his alien voice modulating with distress. "Coordinated attack from multiple vectors." Dave raised his voice. "Everyone in position! Maria, flood the outer corridors now! Jonesy, be ready with those charges the moment they solidify!" The hiss of toxic atmosphere flooding the corridors filled the bunker, followed by the unsettling sound of the shadow creatures moving through solid matter. A high-pitched keening that set teeth on edge and made the alien workers' exoskeletons vibrate in resonance. "They're phasing through the east wall," someone shouted. Dave swung his rifle toward the distortion appearing in the metal, waiting for the crucial moment when the creature would become solid. "Hold! Hold!" he murmured, finger tightening on the trigger. "Now!" The phase pulse rifle discharged with a distinctive whoomp, the energy bolt striking the shadow creature just as it solidified. The being emitted a shriek that transcended normal hearing, vibrating through bone and metal alike, before collapsing into a puddle of oily substance that evaporated within seconds. "Good shot," Wilson called, before firing his own weapon at another materializing shadow. For several minutes, the bunker became a chaos of gunfire, explosions, and the unearthly screams of the shadow creatures. The colonists fought with desperate precision, making every shot count, while the Altarian workers used their extracted bioluminescent fluid as a last line of defense, spraying it on any creature that got past the human defenders. When the attack finally subsided, Dave took stock of their situation. 3 more humans dead, and 2 of the alien workers. The remaining phase pulse rifles were down to their last few charges, and the Altarians had extracted nearly as much of their vital fluid as was safe. "They'll be back," Zentar stated flatly, "and in greater numbers. They want something from us." "What?" Dave asked, genuinely curious despite their dire situation. "There's nothing here but rocks and poison gas." The Altarian's crystalline face could not express emotions as humans understood them, but his voice carried a note of grim certainty. "Us. They want us. Or, more precisely, they want our biological material. Did you not notice they take the bodies? They are harvesters." A chill ran through Dave as he realized Zentar was right. None of the colonists killed by the shadow creatures remained. Their bodies had disappeared during the confusion of battle. "How much longer can we hold out?" Wilson asked, checking the charge on his rifle. Dave glanced at the life support readouts. 22 hours of air. Maybe less if these attacks keep stressing the system. No one stated the obvious. That even if they somehow repelled every attack for the next day, they would still suffocate when the air ran out. Unless help arrived, they were already dead. It was just a question of how they would die. "We keep fighting," Dave said firmly, looking around at the exhausted, frightened faces of his people. "As long as we're breathing, we keep fighting. Earth hasn't forgotten us." Even as he said it, he wondered if he was lying to them. Earth had a galaxy-spanning empire now, with hundreds of colonies and outposts. What was one small mining operation on a death world like Kepler 442b worth to them? The minerals they extracted were valuable, yes, but not irreplaceable. There were other sources, safer planets. His dark thoughts were interrupted by a faint beeping from the communications console. A signal was coming through. "This is Captain Robert Kane of the UES Defender to Kepler 442b Colony. Do you read me? We are inbound to your position at maximum speed. Estimated arrival in 38 hours. Hold on, people. Help is coming." A ragged cheer went up from the colonists. Dave felt tears pricking at his eyes as he rushed to the console. "This is Mining Supervisor Dave Johnson. We read you, Defender. Our situation is critical, but we're still fighting. Unknown hostiles with phase-shifting capabilities. They attack in waves, growing stronger each time. We've lost 19 people so far." "Understood, Johnson. We're pushing our engines beyond safe limits to reach you. Our sensors have detected unusual energy signatures in orbit around your planet. Are you aware of any spacecraft in your vicinity?" Dave exchanged puzzled glances with Maria. "Negative, Defender. We've been cut off from orbital communications since the attacks began." There was a pause before Kane's voice returned. "We're picking up what appears to be a fleet of vessels with similar energy signatures to your attackers. Stand by for update as we get closer." Dave felt his momentary hope falter. A fleet. They were barely holding off the ground attacks. If there was an entire invasion force... "Understood, Defender. We'll hold out as long as we can." As he signed off, Dave turned to face the survivors. "You heard the captain. Help is coming, but we need to hold out for another day and a half." "We don't have enough air for that," Maria pointed out quietly. "Life support will fail in 22 hours. Dave nodded. "Then we need to conserve. Minimal movement, shallow breathing, and we need to thin out our numbers." "What?" Wilson asked, his face showing shock. "Not like that," Dave clarified quickly. "I mean, we need to send some people to the secondary storage bunker. It's smaller, more cramped, but it has its own independent life support system. If we split our group, we might be able to stretch our air supply long enough." It was a desperate gamble. The secondary bunker was less fortified than their current position, and its life support system was designed for emergency use only. But Dave saw no other option. "I'll lead the second group," he announced. "I need 6 volunteers, preferably those with combat experience." To his surprise, all of the remaining Altarians stepped forward, followed by Wilson and 2 other colonists. Dave nodded his thanks, deeply moved by their courage. "Maria, you're in charge here. Keep communications open with us and with the Defender. If those things break through either position, the other group needs to know." As they prepared to move to the secondary bunker, Dave found himself standing beside Zentar. The alien worker's crystalline body gleamed dully in the emergency lighting, cracks still visible from earlier battles. "You were right," Dave said quietly. "Earth didn't forget us." Zentar made the clicking sound that passed for a chuckle among his species. "Perhaps I misjudged your people, human. My kind would never risk a valuable warship for a handful of expendable workers." "That's the difference between us and most galactic species," Dave replied. "To us, no one is expendable." Aboard the Defender, Captain Kane stood before the assembled tactical staff in the ship's conference room. The main view screen displayed the latest sensor data from Kepler 442b, now just 30 hours away at their current velocity. "The situation has evolved," Kane announced grimly. "What we initially detected as energy anomalies has resolved into a fleet of approximately 15 vessels in orbit around Kepler 442b. Configuration unknown, but their energy signatures match the phase-shifting capabilities reported by the colonists." Dr. Samantha Rivera, the ship's xenobiologist, stepped forward. "Based on the data we've received, I believe we're dealing with a species colloquially known as the Wraith Collective. They're not well documented because they rarely leave survivors. But there have been similar attacks reported on the fringes of Centauri space. "What do we know about their capabilities?" asked Major Tom Wilson, commander of the Defenders Marine Detachment. "They exist partially out of phase with normal spacetime," Rivera explained. "This allows them to pass through solid matter by shifting their quantum state. However, they must solidify to interact physically with our environment, which creates a window of vulnerability." The colonists mentioned phase pulse rifles being effective, Commander Park noted. Rivera nodded. "The weapons disrupt their ability to shift phase states, forcing them to remain solid and vulnerable for longer periods. Unfortunately, the rifles are experimental technology with limited distribution. The colony having even a few units was lucky." "What about their ships?" Kane asked. "Do the same vulnerabilities apply?" "Theoretically, yes," Rivera replied. "But their vessels will be much more heavily shielded against phase disruption. Our conventional weapons may not be effective." Major Wilson leaned forward. "What about kinetic weapons? If they need to phase to avoid damage, sustained railgun fire might force them to remain in a phased state, preventing them from attacking." "It's worth trying," Rivera agreed. "And while their ground troops seem to operate in a predatory pattern, attacking, retreating, then attacking again in larger numbers, their ships might be more conventional in tactics." Kane nodded decisively. "Here's the plan. We'll approach at maximum velocity, using our kinetic advantage for the initial engagement. Railguns will target their largest vessels first, with continuous fire to prevent phase shifting. Commander Park, I want all power diverted to forward shields and weapons the moment we enter the system." "And the ground situation, sir?" asked Major Wilson. "Your Marines will deploy the moment we achieve orbital superiority," Kane replied. "Drop pods directly to the colony's coordinates. Dr. Rivera will provide phase disruptor modifications for your weapons. They won't be as effective as dedicated phase pulse rifles, but they should give you an edge." "Time is critical," Park reminded them. "The colonists reported their life support will fail in less than 22 hours. With our current ETA at 30 hours, they'll find a way to survive," Kane said firmly. "These are people who chose to live on a death world. They don't give up easily." As the meeting concluded, Kane returned to the bridge, his mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. He had pushed the Defender beyond its design limits, risking a catastrophic drive failure. He had committed Earth's newest warship to a confrontation with an unknown alien species. And he had done it all for 47 colonists and their alien workers, people who had known the risks when they signed on for Kepler 442b. Some would call it reckless. The cost-benefit analysis simply didn't justify the risk. But that wasn't how humanity had spread among the stars. That wasn't the ethos that had allowed them to colonize death worlds that other species deemed uninhabitable. "Message from engineering. Captain," reported the communications officer. "Chief Engineer Ramos says the main drive is showing signs of imminent failure. He recommends reducing speed to 90% of maximum." Kane didn't hesitate. "Tell Ramos to keep it together for 8 more hours. After that, he can have his precious engines back." On the surface of Kepler 442b, Dave Johnson and his small team had successfully reached the secondary bunker. The journey through the colony's corridors had been harrowing. Twice they'd encountered shadow creatures and been forced to use precious ammunition from their phase pulse rifles. But they'd made it, and the bunker's independent life support system was operational, if not optimal. "Status report," Dave called over the comlink to the main bunker. Maria's voice came through, crackling with interference. "Main bunker holding. No attacks in the past hour. Life support stabilizing with the reduced population. How are things on your end?" "Secure for now," Dave replied. "We've sealed all access points and rigged the last of our explosives at key locations. Any word from the Defender?" They've been maintaining regular contact. Captain Kane reports they're detecting a substantial fleet in orbit. They'll have to fight their way through to reach us. Dave absorbed this news grimly. The shadow creatures, the Wraith, as Kane had called them based on his xenobiologist's assessment, had an entire fleet in orbit, the Defender, while a formidable warship would be outnumbered. We need to find a way to help from the ground, Dave decided. Maria, what's the status of the colony's mining equipment? Most of it was in the outer habitats that were overrun, she replied. But the primary excavator is still in the main loading bay. Why? Dave's mind raced with possibilities. The excavator has a ground-penetrating radar system and a high-energy cutting laser for breaking through particularly dense mineral deposits. If we could repurpose it. As a weapon, Maria sounded dubious. The laser isn't designed for that kind of precision or range. Not as a direct weapon, Dave explained. As a disruptor. Dr. Rivera on the Defender mentioned that sustained energy discharge can interfere with the Wraith's phase-shifting abilities. If we could create a large enough disruption field, we might be able to ground their ships or at least create a safe corridor for the Defender's drop pods. Maria finished, catching on to his thinking. It's possible, but someone would need to reach the loading bay and manually reconfigure the excavator systems. I'll go, Dave decided instantly. Wilson and 2 of the Altarians will come with me. The rest of you stay put and conserve resources. Before Maria could protest, he had already begun gathering equipment. The loading bay was 3 levels up and 2 sections over. A dangerous journey through corridors potentially crawling with Wraith scouts. But if they could create even a small advantage for the Defender, it would be worth the risk. Wilson checked his phase pulse rifle, down to its last 5 charges. We should move now, while it's quiet. The longer we wait, the more likely we'll encounter resistance. Dave nodded, turning to the Altarians. Zentar, you and your people know more about these Wraith than we do. Any advice before we head out? The crystalline alien seemed to consider for a moment. They sense biological energy, movement, heat, electrical impulses from nervous systems. Stay still when possible. Move quickly when necessary. And remember, they learn. Never use the same tactic twice. With those ominous words in mind, Dave led his small team out of the secondary bunker and into the dimly lit corridors of the colony. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow, creating grotesque shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. Every few meters, they would pause, listening for the distinctive keening sound that preceded a Wraith attack. They had made it halfway to the loading bay when Wilson raised a hand, signaling them to stop. Movement ahead, he whispered, indicating a junction where 3 corridors met. Dave peered carefully around the corner. A lone shadow creature drifted through the corridor, seemingly unaware of their presence. Its form rippled and flowed, like smoke given substance, occasionally passing partially through the walls before pulling back. It's patrolling, Dave realized. They're setting up a perimeter. Wilson raised his rifle. I can take it out. Dave placed a restraining hand on the weapon. Save the ammunition. We need a different approach. He turned to Zentar. You said they sense biological energy. What if we give them something to chase? The Altarian understood immediately. He reached into the pouch where they had stored samples of their bioluminescent fluid and extracted a small vial. This will draw them. The fluid remains biologically active for several hours after extraction. Carefully, Zentar opened the vial and poured a small amount of the glowing liquid onto a piece of metal debris. Then, with surprising strength, he hurled the object down a side corridor, away from their intended path. The effect was immediate. The shadow creature's formless head snapped toward the sound, and it glided rapidly in pursuit of the biological signature, vanishing around a corner. "Move," Dave whispered, and they hurried across the junction and continued toward the loading bay. Two more encounters were handled similarly, with the Altarians sacrificing precious amounts of their fluid to create diversions. Finally, they reached the massive doors of the loading bay. "Sealed," Wilson muttered, examining the control panel. "Power's been cut to this section." Dave nodded grimly. "Manual override, then." He and Wilson positioned themselves on either side of the emergency hand crank and began to turn it, slowly, forcing the massive doors to slide apart, just enough for them to slip through. The loading bay was cavernous, designed to accommodate the massive mining vehicles and equipment needed to extract minerals from Kepler 442b's hostile surface. Most of the smaller equipment had been moved or destroyed during the initial Wraith attack, but the primary excavator, a behemoth of engineering nearly 20 meters tall, still stood in its maintenance cradle. "There it is," Dave said, pointing to the machine's control cabin. "Wilson, you and I will work on reconfiguring the laser assembly. Zentar, you and your companion monitor the entrances. If anything comes through, signal us immediately." As they climbed into the excavator's cabin, Dave marveled at the audacity of their plan. They were attempting to convert a mining laser into a weapon against an advanced alien species, while hiding in a partially overrun colony on a planet that was trying to kill them, even without the Wraith's help. It was desperate, possibly foolish, but it was all they had. "Main power's still online," Wilson reported, activating the excavator systems. "The laser draws directly from the colony's geothermal taps, so it should have plenty of juice." Dave nodded, studying the control interfaces. "We need to modify the emission pattern. Instead of a focused cutting beam, we want to create a broad-spectrum energy field. That's going to mean bypassing about a dozen safety protocols," Wilson warned. "And the focusing crystals were never designed for this kind of application. They could shatter." "If they do, they do," Dave replied, already removing access panels to reach the laser's internal components. "We don't need it to last forever, just long enough to help the defender break through." As they worked, a sudden alarm from Zentar drew their attention. "Movement at the main entrance, multiple signatures." Dave and Wilson exchanged glances. "Keep working," Dave ordered. "I'll help them hold the perimeter," grabbing his phase pulse rifle. Dave climbed down from the cabin and joined the Altarians, who had taken cover behind stacks of equipment crates. Through the partially open bay doors, shadowy forms could be seen gathering, more Wraith than he had ever seen in one place. "They know we're here," Zentar said, his alien voice tight with tension. "They're preparing a coordinated attack." Dave checked his rifle's charge indicator. 4 shots remaining. Not nearly enough for the number of enemies they faced. "How much more time does Wilson need?" 5 minutes. Maybe less, came Wilson's voice over the comlink. "I've almost got the emission pattern reconfigured, but I still need to bypass the safety limiters." "We'll give you those 5 minutes," Dave promised, though he had no idea how. He turned to the Altarians. "Any more of that fluid left?" Zentar held up a nearly empty vial. "Barely enough for one more diversion." Dave thought quickly, his eyes scanning the loading bay for anything they could use as a weapon or barrier. His gaze fell on a rack of pressure suits designed for surface operations. Bulky garments meant to protect workers from Kepler 442b's toxic atmosphere and crushing pressure. "Those suits," he said suddenly, "they're designed to withstand the surface environment. The Wraith phase through solid matter. But what about gas and liquid under pressure?" Zentar's crystalline eyes seemed to brighten with understanding. "The atmosphere might disrupt their phasing ability, especially in its compressed state within the suits." "Exactly," Dave nodded. "Help me gather as many air tanks as you can find. We're going to create a very unpleasant surprise for our visitors." working rapidly. They collected a dozen compressed air tanks from the pressure suits and positioned them near the bay doors. Dave rigged a simple detonator to rupture the tanks simultaneously, creating what he hoped would be a concentrated blast of Kepler 442b's toxic atmosphere, air laden with hydrogen sulfide, chlorine compounds, and particulate matter abrasive enough to scour human lungs in minutes. "Almost ready," Wilson called from the excavator, bypassing final safety protocols now. The wraith at the entrance had begun to phase through the partially open doors, their shadowy forms rippling as they transitioned from insubstantial to solid and back again. Dave counted at least 15 of them, with more gathering behind. "On my mark," Dave told Zentar, his finger poised over the detonator. "When they're mostly through, but before they can spread out." The first wraith had fully entered the loading bay, its featureless head swiveling as if sensing their presence. More followed, their movements becoming more purposeful as they detected the biological signatures of the defenders. "Now!" Dave pressed the detonator. The compressed air tanks ruptured with a deafening roar, releasing a pressurized cloud of Kepler's deadly atmosphere directly into the path of the advancing wraith. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The shadow creatures caught in the cloud began to writhe and contort, their phasing ability disrupted by the toxic compounds. Several of them became trapped in mid-phase, partially materialized and unable to either solidify completely or return to their insubstantial state. "It's working!" Dave shouted over the hissing of escaping gas. "Wilson, status?" "Ready to activate," came the reply. "But we'll only get one shot at this. The focusing crystals are already showing stress fractures from the reconfiguration." Dave raised his rifle and fired at one of the semi-materialized wraith, the phase pulse striking it squarely and causing it to collapse into the now familiar puddle of rapidly evaporating oil. "Do it now! Full power!" Wilson activated the modified mining laser instead of its usual tight, cutting beam. The weapon emitted a broad cone of energy that bathed the entire entrance area in pulsating light. The remaining wraith caught in the beam froze in place, their shadowy forms solidifying completely as their phasing ability was neutralized. "Keep firing! I'll handle these!" Dave called, picking off the now vulnerable creatures one by one with his rifle. 3 shots left. 3 wraith down. 2 shots. 2 more wraith. Final shot. He missed. The pulse grazing a wraith that continued to advance despite being locked in solid form. Before Dave could react, Zentar lunged forward, smashing his crystalline arm against the solidified creature. The impact shattered both the wraith and a portion of Zentar's exoskeleton, sending fragments of both beings scattering across the floor. "Zentar!" Dave rushed to the alien's side. The Altarian's bioluminescent fluid was leaking profusely from the shattered limb. "Worth it," Zentar managed, his voice weaker than before. "Is the weapon working?" Dave looked up at the excavator. The mining laser continued to pulse, but even from here, he could see cracks forming in its emitter assembly. "Wilson, status?" "We're broadcasting on all frequencies," Wilson called back. "The energy field extends about 5 kilometers into the atmosphere. It won't last long, but it should disrupt any wraith ships that try to pass through it." As if in response to his words, the entire colony shuddered as something massive passed overhead. Through the loading bay's small observation ports, Dave caught a glimpse of a dark shape descending through Kepler 442b's toxic clouds. A ship, but not one of the wraith vessels. This one bore the unmistakable profile of an Earth Defense Force dropship. "They're here," Dave breathed, hardly daring to believe it. The defender made it through. The excavator's laser gave one final, brilliant pulse before the emitter assembly shattered completely, raining fragments of focusing crystal onto the loading bay floor. But it had done its job. A corridor of disrupted space had been cleared through the Wraith blockade, allowing the Defender's Marines to reach the surface. All Colonial personnel, this is Sergeant Mike Stone of the Defender Marine Detachment, came a new voice over the emergency comm channel. We are touching down at multiple locations around the colony perimeter. Hold your positions and stand by for extraction. I repeat, hold your positions. Dave helped Zentar to a sitting position against one of the equipment crates. You hear that? Help has arrived. The Altarian's crystalline face couldn't form a smile, but his voice carried a note of weary satisfaction. It seems I was wrong about humans. Mining Supervisor Dave Johnson. Your people do not abandon their own. No, Dave agreed, patching the alien's shattered arm as best he could with materials from a nearby first aid kit. We don't. Now let's get you ready to move. Our ride is here. In orbit above Kepler 442b, the UES Defender emerged from its final acceleration burn, its engines glowing white-hot from the sustained overload. Captain Kane stood on the bridge, watching as the tactical display resolved to show the Wraith fleet, 15 vessels of varying sizes, arranged in a loose blockade formation around the planet. They've detected us, Commander Park reported. Wraith vessels altering position to intercept. Active targeting solutions on the 3 largest ships, Kane ordered. Prepare to fire all forward railgun batteries on my mark. Maximum velocity projectiles, continuous salvo. The Defender's railguns were its primary offensive weapons. Electromagnetic accelerators capable of launching depleted uranium slugs at significant fractions of light speed. Against conventional vessels, such weapons were devastating. Against the phase-shifting Wraith ships, their effectiveness remained to be seen. Sir, we're receiving an encoded transmission from the surface, reported the communications officer. It's from the colony. They've managed to activate some kind of phase disruption field using modified mining equipment. It's creating a corridor through the Wraith's defensive screen, but it won't last long. Kane nodded sharply. Tactical. Adjust our approach vector to utilize that corridor. Major Wilson, launch your dropships immediately. Take advantage of that opening while we engage the orbital forces. As the Marine dropships detached from the Defender's ventral bays, the ship itself accelerated toward the largest of the Wraith vessels. Enemy ships powering weapons, Park warned. Energy signatures indicate directed plasma weaponry, similar to Centauri designs, but more focused. Evasive pattern delta, Kane ordered. Bring us in at an oblique angle. Present minimum profile. Fire railguns as soon as we're in optimal range. The Defender lurched as its maneuvering thrusters fired, sending the massive warship into a tight spiral that would make it harder for the Wraith vessels to target. The enemy responded with streams of brilliant energy that sliced through the void, most missing their nimble target, but one grazing the Defender's port side. Minor damage to outer hull plating, reported the damage control officer. Shields holding at 92%. In range, Park announced. Optimal firing solution achieved. Kane didn't hesitate. Fire all forward batteries. Continuous salvo until target neutralized. The Defender's railguns spoke, sending dozens of hypervelocity projectiles streaking toward the lead Wraith vessel. The enemy ship began to phase out of normal space-time, its outline becoming translucent, but the sheer volume of kinetic projectiles prevented a complete phase shift. Several slugs struck home, tearing through the partially material hull and causing cascading energy discharges throughout the vessel. Direct hits, Park called out, a note of surprise in her voice. Target's phasing ability is compromised. They can't fully shift out of material space while under continuous fire, just as Dr. Rivera predicted. Kane nodded with grim satisfaction. Continue firing on that vessel. Bring us about to engage the second target as soon as the first is neutralized. The lead Wraith ship listed to one side, venting atmosphere and energy from multiple hull breaches. Its return fire became erratic, then ceased altogether as critical systems failed. Around it, the remaining Wraith vessels began to adjust their tactics, spreading out to present multiple targets rather than clustering together. "Sir, they're adapting," Park warned. "Splitting into smaller attack groups. We can't maintain continuous fire on all of them simultaneously." Kane studied the tactical display, noting the patterns of movement. "They're still focused on preventing us from reaching the planet. That means the dropships have a chance if we keep the Wraith fleet occupied." He tapped a control, opening a channel to engineering. "Ramos, I need maximum power to the main railgun batteries, even if it means reducing life support to minimal levels." "Understood, Captain," came the chief engineer's strained voice. "But I should warn you, the main drive coolant system is reaching critical temperatures. We can maintain combat operations for approximately 20 minutes before risking catastrophic failure." 20 minutes is all we need," Kane replied confidently. "Tactical. Coordinate firing solutions to keep as many enemy vessels under continuous fire as possible. Priority on any ships moving to intercept our dropships." The battle evolved into a deadly dance, with the Defender weaving between Wraith vessels, its railguns firing almost continuously to prevent the enemy from fully phasing out of vulnerable material state. 2 more Wraith ships succumbed to the barrage, breaking apart in spectacular cascades of energy as their phase shift generators overloaded. But the Defender was taking damage as well. Wraith energy weapons had scored multiple hits on its hull, reducing shield strength to less than 40% and disabling one of the secondary railgun batteries. Engineering reported increasing strain on the overtaxed systems, with multiple cooling subsystems failing and radiation levels rising in the engine compartments. "Dropships have reached the atmosphere," reported the sensor officer. "They're proceeding along the disruption corridor created by the colonists. Estimated touchdown in 3 minutes." Kane allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The Marines would soon be on the ground, extracting the survivors. All the Defender needed to do was hold the orbital space long enough for them to complete their mission and return. "Sir!" Park's voice cut through his thoughts. 3 Wraith vessels are breaking formation, accelerating directly toward the planet. They're on an intercept course with our dropships. "Target those vessels immediately," Kane ordered. "Maximum fire concentration." The Defender's remaining railguns swiveled to track the fleeing Wraith ships, sending streams of hypervelocity projectiles after them. 2 of the vessels were caught in the barrage, their phasing abilities disrupted enough to sustain critical damage. But the third, smaller and more agile than its companions, managed to evade the worst of the fire and continued its plunge toward the atmosphere. "We can't get a clean shot without endangering our own dropships," Park reported tensely. Kane made a swift decision. "Helm, pursue that vessel. Take us into the upper atmosphere if necessary." "Sir, the Defender isn't designed for atmospheric operations," the helmsman protested. "The structural stress is less important than the lives of our people." Kane finished firmly. "Execute the order." The massive warship altered course, diving toward Kepler 442b's toxic atmosphere in pursuit of the fleeing Wraith vessel. Warning alarms blared across the bridge as the outer hull began to heat from atmospheric friction, compounded by the already dangerously high temperatures from the overtaxed engines. "Target locked," Park announced, "but they'll reach our dropships before we can neutralize them at this range." Kane studied the tactical display for a fraction of a second before making his decision. "Divert all remaining power to the forward shields and main sensor array. Plot a ramming course." A stunned silence fell over the bridge, broken only by the continuing alarms. "Sir?" Park questioned, her professional demeanor slipping for the first time. "You heard me, Commander," Kane replied calmly. "That Wraith ship is going to attack our Marines, and the colonists they're extracting. We can't allow that to happen. Our forward shields are still at 38%, enough to survive an impact long enough to fire point blank into their vulnerable systems." No one on the bridge questioned the order further. The helmsmen adjusted their course, bringing the Defender on a direct intercept path with the diving Wraith vessel. The enemy ship detected their approach and attempted evasive maneuvers, but its options were limited by the same atmospheric constraints affecting the Defender. Impact in 10 seconds, Park counted down. Wraith vessel attempting to phase. They can't fully phase while moving at this velocity through atmosphere. Kane noted with grim satisfaction. Stand by all point defense weapons for point-blank firing the moment we make contact. The distance closed rapidly. The Wraith ship growing from a small blip on the tactical display to a looming shadow visible through the bridge viewports. Its alien design became apparent. A dark, elongated shape with no visible engines or weapons ports, its surface rippling with the same phase-shifting effect as the ground troops. "Brace for impact!" Kane called, gripping his command chair as the Defender's massive prow slammed into the Wraith vessel. The collision was less violent than expected. The Wraith ship's partial phasing allowed the Defender to pass partially through its structure, creating a bizarre moment where both vessels occupied the same space. But the effect on the Wraith ship was catastrophic. Its phasing generators, already strained by atmospheric entry and evasive maneuvers, failed completely when confronted with the mass of an Earth-heavy cruiser passing through its material structure. "Fire all point defense weapons," Kane ordered. The Defender's laser arrays activated, pouring energy into the Wraith ship's now vulnerable systems at point-blank range. The effect was immediate and decisive. The enemy vessel convulsed as if in pain, its structure breaking apart from within as its power core destabilized. "Pull us away! Maximum thrust!" Kane commanded, as warning indicators showed the imminent destruction of the Wraith ship. The Defender's engines roared, pushing the massive vessel clear, just as the Wraith ship detonated in a spectacular release of energy. The shockwave caught the human vessel's stern, sending it tumbling momentarily, before the helmsman regained control. "Damage reporter," Kane called, picking himself up from where the impact had thrown him. "Shields completely depleted," Park reported, wiping blood from a cut on her forehead. "Hull breaches on decks 8 through 12. Engineering reports the main drive is offline. Coolant systems have failed completely. We're operating on emergency power only." Kane nodded, accepting the news. "And the dropships?" "All 5 made it to the surface." "Sir," reported the communications officer. "Sergeant Stone reports they've made contact with both groups of survivors and are beginning extraction. Estimated time to completion, 15 minutes. "And the remaining Wraith vessels?" Park checked the tactical display. "Regrouping at the edge of the system. They appear to be retreating, sir." A weary smile touched Kane's lips. "They didn't expect us to ram them, did they? Sometimes the old ways are still the best." "Sir," the communications officer interrupted. "Message from Sergeant Stone on the surface. They've secured all surviving colonists and are preparing for liftoff. 28 humans and 11 alien workers extracted alive. 28 humans out of 47. 11 aliens out of 20. A heavy toll, but far better than complete annihilation." Kane felt a mixture of grief for those lost and pride in what they had accomplished. "Order the dropships to rendezvous with us at the edge of the atmosphere," he instructed. "We'll use maneuvering thrusters to achieve a stable orbit until engineering can get the main drive back online. And send a message to Luna Station. Mission accomplished. Survivors secured. Requesting assistance for return journey." On the surface of Kepler 442b, Dave Johnson sat in the cramped confines of the Marine dropship, Zentar secured beside him in a specially adapted harness. Around them, the other survivors, both human and alien, were being tended to by the Defender's medical personnel. Through the viewport, Dave could see the toxic landscape of Kepler 442b falling away as the dropship ascended toward orbit. Sergeant Stone approached, his armor bearing the scars of combat against the Wraith ground forces. "Mining Supervisor Johnson? Captain Kane would like to speak with you." Dave accepted the offered communit. "This is Johnson." "Supervisor Johnson," "This is Captain Kane," came the steady voice that had promised rescue 30 hours earlier. "I wanted to personally commend you and your people. Your improvised phase disruption field gave us the opening we needed to break through the Wraith blockade." "Just returning the favor, Captain," Dave replied. "You came for us when most would have written us off." There was a brief pause before Kane responded. "Earth doesn't abandon its own Johnson. No matter how far they roam or how dangerous the rescue might be, an SOS to Earth is never answered lightly." As the dropship broke through the upper atmosphere, Dave could see the Defender in orbit, its hull scarred and blackened from battle, but still intact. Further away, near the edge of the system, the retreating Wraith fleet was visible as faint points of light against the darkness. "What about the colony?" Dave asked, suddenly thinking of the years of work they had put into establishing a foothold on this hostile world. "That will be for Earth Command to decide," Kane replied. "But I'll include in my report that the colonists demonstrated exceptional courage and resourcefulness, and that Kepler 442b, for all its dangers, proved to be defensible with the right preparations." Dave looked around at the survivors, the humans who had chosen to make their living on a death world, and the alien workers who had fought alongside them against a common enemy. Many were injured, all were exhausted, but there was a sense of shared triumph that transcended species. "We'll be back," Dave said, more to himself than to Kane. "Kepler 442b hasn't seen the last of us." Beside him, Zentar stirred. "Your kind are truly Deathworlders," the alien observed, his voice still weak, but carrying a note of newfound respect. "You not only survive where others perish, you return to places that have nearly killed you." Dave smiled. "That's humanity for you. Too stubborn to know when to quit." 3 weeks later, the repaired Defender approached Earth, escorted by 2 support vessels that had met them at the edge of the solar system. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Samantha Rivera was completing her final examination of Zentar's regenerated arm. The Altarian's remarkable biology had allowed him to regrow the shattered limb with only minimal assistance from human medical technology. "Remarkable recovery," Rivera noted, making a final entry in her medical log. "Your species' regenerative capabilities are truly impressive." "As is your species' determination," Zentar replied. "News of what happened at Kepler 442b has spread throughout the Altarian networks. They're calling it the Deathworlder response." Rivera raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what does that mean?" "It means that when humans make a promise to protect their own, they keep it, regardless of cost or probability of success." The alien's crystalline eyes seemed to gleam with something like amusement. "The Centauri Diplomatic Corps is already revising their protocols for dealing with human colonies. They've categorized Earth's response as irrationally committed to preservation of individual lives." "They say that like it's a bad thing," Rivera chuckled. "On the contrary," Zentar corrected, "they consider it a warning to any who might threaten human interests. The Wraith Collective has withdrawn completely from 3 other systems, where they had begun probing defenses. Your reputation precedes you now." On the bridge, Captain Kane was completing his official report as Earth grew larger in the view screen. Commander Park stood beside him, reviewing the duty roster for their upcoming shore leave. "Final casualty count?" Kane asked, without looking up from his terminal. 19 colonists and 9 alien workers lost on Kepler 442b. Park reported. 11 Defender crew members killed in action, 27 wounded, 3 Marine casualties during the ground extraction. Kane nodded solemnly. Each loss weighed on him. But given the circumstances, it could have been far worse. "And the status of the colony?" "Earth Command has authorized a full rebuilding and fortification effort," Park replied, unable to keep a note of surprise from her voice. They're sending a permanent defensive installation and doubling the mining operations capacity. Apparently, the minerals from Kepler 442b have become even more valuable now that the Wraith Collective has revealed its interest in the system. And the survivors? Most have requested reassignment to the rebuilt colony once it's operational, including Mining Supervisor Johnson. He's already submitted plans for improved defensive measures based on their experience against the Wraith. A small smile touched Kane's lips. Deathworlders, too stubborn to know when to quit. He made a final entry in his report, the words appearing on the screen with a sense of finality. In conclusion, the rescue operation at Kepler 442b confirms what humanity has always known, but what the galactic community is only beginning to understand. An SOS to Earth is never answered lightly. We will cross the void, brave the impossible, and face any enemy to bring our people home. This is not recklessness or irrationality. It is who we are, and now the stars know it too. Captain Robert Kane, U.S. Defender, mission complete. The document was logged and transmitted to Earth Command as the Defender settled into its approach vector for home. On the observation deck, Dave Johnson stood with Maria Lopez and Sergeant Stone, watching their blue-green homeworld grow larger with each passing moment. "Will you really go back?" Maria asked, her wounded arm now healed but still bearing the scars of their ordeal. Dave nodded without hesitation. "Kepler 442b is home now, and next time we'll be ready for whatever the galaxy throws at us." "You'll have better support," Stone assured him. "After what happened, Earth Command isn't taking any chances. You'll have a proper defensive installation, military-grade weapons, even a permanent garrison of Marines." "And the Wraith?" Maria asked. "They learned their lesson," Stone replied confidently. "Turns out, attacking a human colony is bad for your species' health." Dave smiled as Earth filled the viewport, its familiar continents and oceans a welcome sight after weeks in deep space. They would rest, recover, and rebuild. And then they would return to their death world, stronger and more prepared than before. Because that's what humans did. They adapted, they overcame, and they never, ever gave up. Across the galaxy, on hundreds of worlds, and in countless alien communications, the story spread. Deathworlders respond. 3 words that carried a promise and a warning. A promise to those who flew Earth's flag that they would never be abandoned, no matter how distant or desperate their situation. And a warning to any who might threaten them, that humans answered every SOS, and they did not come in peace when their own were in danger. For Dave Johnson and the survivors of Kepler 442b, it was simply the confirmation of what they had always believed, that even on the edge of known space, facing impossible odds on a planet that tried to kill them daily, they were never truly alone. Earth remembered its own, always.